So, can you shoot wildlife photography with a medium format camera in 2025? Because we all know that medium format is fantastic when it comes to landscape, when it comes to studio, when it comes to real estate, when it comes to all those slower pace, image quality first type of scenarios. But no one has ever considered the possibility of shooting wildlife with a sensor that was bigger than full frame. Most notably because there were no lenses that would allow you to do that. For the GFX system, the longest lens before the release of the 500mm f2 was the 250, which basically is at 200mm on full frame terms. That was not going to make it when it comes to wildlife photographer. Fujifilm, with the release of these 500mm and the second generation of GFX cameras, is opening now the possibilities of shooting wildlife also to those medium format photographers that don't do wildlife as their main thing. In my opinion, this is the target of Fujifilm, is basically allowing medium format photographers to also be able to shoot wildlife if that is not their main thing. Because if you're a wildlife photographer, 100% wildlife photographer, you will not look at the GFX system just because one lens doesn't make a system for wildlife photography. However, if you're a landscape photographer that often does wildlife and your system is a GFX system, you may not want to have another system. You may not want to be forced to bring another set of cameras, another set of lenses just because you want to do some wildlife here and there. In my opinion, this is the answer to that type of need. The GFX100S Mark II and the 500mm f5.6 have delivered big time when it comes to wildlife photography. Let me show you, and then we're gonna keep talking about it. As you've seen, you definitely can shoot wildlife photography. There are some limitations, and we're going to talk about those. And of course, those are inevitable right now with the technology that the medium format sensor have. However, again, if that is not your main thing, what you're going to get from this setup, both for video and photo, are going to be more than enough. Now, let me be clear. I'm not going to do a review of the camera or the lens in this specific video. I've already reviewed the 100S Mark II in a couple of videos. You're going to find them over here. And I also reviewed the 500mm f5.6 for the X mount. So for the APS-C mount, the lens is basically the same. Aside from the color, this is dark, the other one is white. And aside from the fact that on APS-C, you're only taking advantage of the center of the image, the lens is basically the same. Same features, same build quality, same everything. I'm going to touch about a couple of things when it comes to the image quality on this lens because of the dimension of the sensor that you're going to be using it with. But aside from that, I'm not going to be super specific with those things. In this video, I want to talk to you about what you can expect if you want to explore doing wildlife photography with a GFX camera. And so what you can expect incredible image quality. One thing that needs to be reminded is that when it comes to burst shooting, you lose the 16-bit depth on your RAW, and you basically are downgraded to 14-bit. I never felt like this was a big enough sacrifice for me to notice anything wrong with the images. The images that I got were spectacularly good, so no real complaint there. You have plenty of flexibility in raising the shadows. Your ISO are spectacularly good, even the high ISO. The image quality is rich, is sharp, is everything you can possibly ask from a medium format camera. So that needs to be said. And also, of course, being 100 megapixel files, the buffer fills up a lot faster than, let's say, the 26 megapixel files that you get out of the X-H2S, of course. And this camera specifically doesn't have CF Express Type B cards. This works with UHS 2 SD cards, so that doesn't help. However, I never felt like I was hitting the buffer and I was being damaged by missing shots because the buffer was getting filled very quickly. Because you get 7 frames per second with this camera, it's not super high anyways, so you still have a few seconds of burst that are usable, and if you know what you're doing, a few seconds should be more than enough. If anything, you may be willing to use a higher burst rate, but this camera doesn't allow you to go further than that. And you don't want to use electronic viewfinder because the rolling shutter, the electronic shutter, because the rolling shutter that you're going to get, especially in a fast-moving scene, is going to be pretty bad. So you are stuck with 7 frames per second and a shorter buffer compared to what you can get out of an APS-C body, for example, to remain in Fujifilm's realm. But it's not that bad. Of course, you're going to get less shots, but you can live with it. I don't want to sound like the old guy. When we were young, we were shooting manual focus and 1 frame per second. That is bullshit. It doesn't really make any sense to say something like that. But in reality, this camera is fast enough and allows you to get enough keepers that you don't really feel any issue with it. Where you have a little bit more compromise is on video, because this camera is an incredibly good camera also for video, and the layout of the custom settings together with the movie and still switch together with the flexibility you have with the camera allows you to be very precise on what you are going to get from both photos and video. This is how all the new cameras the Fujifilm will launch, or the professional ones, have to be. So X-H3, X-H3S have to have something like that. That is key. Fujifilm, if you're listening, and I know you're listening because you sent me this kit, you have to take care of that. But I was saying, in video, you only have 4K 30 frames per second. And if you want a little bit of slow motion, you have to revert to 1080 at 60 frames per second. Compared to what you can get out of the X-H2S, there's two different worlds. With the X-H2S, you get 4K 120, yes, cropped, but it's still there. And you get a very good 4K 120. And you can get 1080 at 240 if you want. With this one, you are much more limited when it comes to the frame rate. However, the image quality that you get even in video is pretty good. Of course, there's the risk of finding a little bit of rolling shutter, as I mentioned already. It's part of the sensor, it's part of the technology, it's not a stacked sensor, so it's kind of expected. But again, if that's not your your daily bread and butter, you're gonna be more than fine with what you're gonna get out of this combination. I am really pleased. I've been using this combination for a month now. The thousands of shots that I was able to capture, I wasn't disappointed at all. Coming to the real experience of shooting, how did I set my camera? I set my camera to be 1080, 60 frames per second in video most of the time. I would manually switch to 4K 30 frames per second whenever the scene was already slow and didn't require any slow motion. And when it comes to the pictures, I basically set my camera for when I was doing wildlife. I went into a 35 millimeters format because of a couple of reasons. One, it gets you a little bit more rich. A 500 millimeters on medium format is a little bit shorter, is 400 and something in full frame terms. By selecting your 35 millimeters equivalent format in camera, you basically use this lens as a 500 millimeters, and you get rid of the only issue that I found with this lens that wasn't there with the X mount, and it's here with the GFX mount. This lens, when you're using the whole sensor, vignettes quite visibly. Not a big deal, you can get rid of it, but it's visible. Once you go into 35 millimeter format, you basically deal with the issue already, and you don't have to think about it. But also, it diminishes the size of the files, and it extends your range in a way that basically make everything more functional for wildlife shooting. For those shots that didn't need the range, I would assign the front button over here to the format switch, and I would go back to medium format, so I would have a larger frame. And that I found that is the easiest way of doing this type of thing. And once I got used to it, it all felt pretty straightforward, pretty reliable, pretty good when it comes to the result that I was getting. Now, let's talk about the autofocus, because of course we all know medium format already isn't the fastest of the system when it comes to autofocus, and autofocus with wildlife is key. I found this lens and this camera together combined perform pretty much like what you get out of the X-H2S. The X-H2S is a tad better just because the stacked sensor allows for a faster read of what's going on, and you have the blackout free and all of that, so that thing helps. But in general, you get pretty good result. This lens is exceptionally good when it comes to image quality, and even the autofocus is snappy, precise, and really is as good as it gets when it comes to medium format. But also compared to the X-H2S, it's not that much different. So all in all, I found this combination, if you're a medium format photographer and you're interested in wildlife photography, I would say purchase the lens and don't bother purchasing another system because it's going to cost you more. With this lens, you get an exceptionally good lens. You spend what, $3,500, and you get everything that you can possibly ask. If you're buying another system, you're spending more, and you're not getting the quality that you get out of this lens if you want to stay in a similar budget. So I would say this is a perfect solution for those who were looking at upgrading their GFX system to be able to deal with some wildlife, big mammals, big birds. This lens is plenty long for that, but even smaller birds, I was able to, if they are confident enough, you can get pretty close and get pretty good results. You blur the background pretty pleasingly. You get basically no chromatic aberration. The only flaw that I mentioned already is vignetting, but you get rid of it going to 35 millimeters format. And really, I cannot complain about this combo at all. I am mad at myself because I didn't ask to have the teleconverter together with this kit so that I would test that for you guys. But it is what it is. I think that would have worked pretty good as well. For what concerns me, really, I don't have much more to say. The only thing is sometimes when you're shooting video, the autofocus, when there's plenty of subjects that you can possibly get, tends to drift to another subject. That is something that is in the algorithm, in Fujifilm's algorithm, that still needs to be fixed, but it's not dramatically bad. And the other thing is that sometimes this lens, if the subject is completely out of focus, you still see the square around the subject, but the lens doesn't doesn't focus there. You need to, I had to set this with like the full-time manual focus type of thing, meaning autofocus plus manual focus. I would help the autofocus by moving quickly the manual focus ring towards bringing the focus on the subject. Once it sees the subject, it doesn't lose it. This happens only in video. I don't know what it is. The camera is updated to the latest firmware, while for photos, this is a non-issue. But aside from that, I found that it's not that big a deal. I couldn't really complain. The lens is spectacularly good. The camera is spectacularly good. Everything that you do, the feeling of the camera is incredibly good. You get high ISO that cover every possible need. I tend to use auto ISO. When I'm shooting wildlife, I use auto ISO up to 12,800 ISO. Shooting for the most part wide open, and with a shutter speed that stays between 2001 over to 2500 of a second, or even faster, and that has given me pretty great results. So for what concerns me, I think this is a pretty good option, and it's pretty overlooked most of the time, just because we're not used to think about medium format when it comes to wildlife photography. Again, to me, it's a great combination for those who are already medium format photographers and need or want to have something that long to do some kind of wildlife. I wouldn't invest on this from scratch only for wildlife, because the 500mm f.6 and the X-H2S are going to give you more keepers and more video options and more capabilities at a lower price. So as long as you already have a camera, or you're planning on buying a camera and you were on the fence just because you didn't know if you could do wildlife with a GFX system, and you were thinking, should I go full frame? I know medium format is going to cut it for me for everything but wildlife. If were on that type of fence, don't worry. This is going to get you covered, and you are going to get the best of both worlds. I believe that's it. I want to thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. This is going to be a pretty busy couple of weeks. You will see why.